Right. So let's begin our session. Today we'll be discussing about a topic called DNS. So we have seen like VPC. We have seen the concept of VPC and all the things, all the components that are present inside VPC, all those things. So let's discuss Route 53 today. And we are at to discuss NACL something. So I have deleted all the VPC, all the servers there. That's the reason why I'll show you like we'll be discussing. Okay, we'll be discussing that the advantage of NACL, all those things in the upcoming sessions. But for now, let's start with Route 53. Route 53 is a DNS service. You know, right? What is Route 53? Route 53 in AWS is a DNS service. Let me show you. Can you see my screen? Able to see me? Able to see my screen? So I'm not getting any response. So am I audible?
Yes, Vamshi.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So let me go through like what is DNS. Okay. So before we start Route 53, we need to understand what is DNS. Okay. Why? Because Route 53 usually in the AWS cloud is called as a DNS service. Route 53 is nothing but DNS, domain name system, or otherwise it is called as domain name service. So to understand what is Route 53 exactly, let me show you. I'm just opening the paint to make you understand what actually the Route 53 is. Usually what happens is, consider we have an application running. Even you are aware of like we have installed, consider some application is running in the server. Okay. Just assume that we have some application running in the server. So you can assume that either the application is hdfcbank.com, iccibank.com, SBI net bank, whatever it is. Okay. Assume that some application is running over this particular server. If any application is running over here, okay, SBI net banking.com, just I'm taking an example. Okay. You can take any example here. So I assume that some application is running over here. And if the application is running, usually, how can we access this application which is running in this server? Any idea? How actually we access this application? Consider some application is running in this server. How can we access this application which is running
Which is running
with the help of
with the help of URL, HTTPS something.
URL only? But
URL only, but
usually what happens is, yeah. So usually we access this application with the help of the domain name. You know, usually we have consider usually if we are accessing some applications like Facebook.com, Twitter.com, whatever the application is. Usually we access the application with the help of domain name. Okay. So in the browser, I'll open the browser, and in the browser we used to provide the domain name like sbinetbanking.com. Okay. Maybe this is not the official, okay, official domain name, but I'm taking an example. Usually we access the application with the help of the domain name. You know, we are using this domain name. Usually we try to access, we will go to the browser and we used to access the application by using this domain name. But internally, what happens is, let me show you one diagram so that you will understand very clearly. You can look at this diagram here very clearly. Usually what happens, first we will be sending a request. First we will be sending the request. What request we are sending? Assume that we are sending a request of www.sbinetbanking.com, or otherwise any website, okay, any other application, any domain. If you are sending the request from the browser, we'll open the browser and we'll be sending the request, so that the request will be reaching to the DNS server, whatever the domain name you use from the browser, that request will first reaches to the DNS server. What is the full form of DNS? The full form of DNS is domain name system, or otherwise it is also called as domain name service. The full form of DNS is, DNS stands for domain name system, or otherwise domain name server. What this DNS server will do? This DNS server will takes that domain name and converts that into IP address. Usually it takes that. First, usually the request goes to the DNS server. The DNS server will convert that into IP address. And again, from the browser, it will be sending an HTTP request to that particular IP address, to the server's IP address. And from that particular server, we will be getting the HTTP response. Okay. So assume that if you are accessing any application with the help of domain, first we'll open the browser and we used to access with the help of domain. First, the request will goes to the DNS server. From the DNS server, the DNS server converts that domain name into IP address. And that IP address, okay. So we'll be sending the HTTP request to that particular IP address. The browser, okay. Browser will by default, browser will automatically send HTTP request to that particular server. From that particular server, we'll be getting the response. This is the actual thing goes. But you see, if I'm getting a response from SBI net banking or HDFC net banking, usually I'm sending request to I'm accessing that application with the help of the IP address. I am accessing that application with the help of the IP address only. But usually they won't share the IP address to the public. They will not share the public IP address or whatever they will not share this public IP address to the public. Okay. So usually, because there are many reasons why they will not share this public IP. One is the security reason. They won't share this public IP to the public because there are security reasons. And at the same time, it's very difficult to remember this public IP, right? It's very difficult to remember the IP address. Which one is easier for us? It's very easy to remember the names of the website or names of the domain names, right? Like www.google.com, facebook.com. It's very easy to remember the domain names. And it's very hard to remember the IP addresses. So usually what happens is we will be accessing the application with the help of domain name. Okay. Try to understand the flow here. We'll open the browser. We'll be sending the request to the browser will send request to the DNS server. The DNS server will convert that request into IP address. And from the browser, again, it sends an HTTP request to the IP address so that we will be getting responses. Hope you have cleared like what is happening internally when we are trying to access the application with the help of the domain name. Okay. So now why I'm talking about all these things? Why I'm now talking about all this DNS concept? Because we are now going to understand a service in the AWS called Route 53. We are now going to understand a service called Route 53. Route 53 is nothing but what? It is a DNS. It's called as DNS. DNS stands for domain name system or otherwise domain name service. Okay. So there are some other advantages. Okay. This is not only the advantage actually. So by using Route 53, what we can do is we can create the domain name. Okay. I am not. Okay. So now you can go through this one. Okay. This is not only the advantage. What is the advantage with the Route 53? So usually with the help of Route 53, what we can do is we can purchase the domain name. Suppose if I am having an application, otherwise if I'm going to design some website for myself, vamsicloud.com. Okay. Consider some website I'm going to design. Okay. vamsicloud.com or something like that. So if this is the domain name I want, first I need to purchase the domain name. Okay. I need to purchase the domain name. Do we have any websites? Do we have any websites to purchase the domain names and all? Usually we have the
GoDaddy.
yes.
GoDaddy something.
Sites to purchase the domain names and all. Okay, like GoDaddy. Example one is GoDaddy. You can go to GoDaddy and other similar kind of websites. Okay, and you can purchase the domain name. You can link the domain name to the IP address. I can link that particular domain name. Okay, consider I'm going to purchase a domain name called vamsicloud.com. What I will do is I will link the domain name to my IP address. I link the domain name to my IP address. So while sharing to the public, okay, if I want to share my website details to the public, I won't share my IP address. What I'm going to share with them, I'll be sharing them the domain name.
DNS.
I'll be sharing them
Yes.
the domain name, okay, DNS. So this is how actually happens. First, we need to register the domain name. Okay. If it is not a cloud, actually, if it is not the AWS cloud, usually we can purchase the domain names. We can purchase the domain names from the websites like GoDaddy and the similar kind of websites. If it is a cloud, if it is an AWS cloud, usually in the AWS cloud also we can purchase the domain name. Even in the AWS cloud also we can purchase the domain name. Okay, so that we can link the domain name to the IP addresses. That this is one advantage. Okay, this is one advantage we have with the DNS. Let's understand what is the other advantages we have. The second advantage. The second advantage is Route 53 helps from the regional failures. Very, very important thing. Route 53 helps us from the regional failures. How can it help us from the regional failures? First of all, let's understand what is regional failure. Assume that my application, I have my infrastructure in the Mumbai region, and I also have my infrastructure in the Sydney region. We see here, I have my infrastructure in the Mumbai region, and I also have infrastructure in the Sydney region. And I have my complete setup in the Mumbai region. Similarly, I have my complete setup in the Sydney region, meaning my application is running in the Mumbai region, and similar kind of setup is also there in the Sydney region. What I'm doing is, if I'm purchasing the domain name, okay, if I'm purchasing the domain name, usually what happens is I will be attaching the domain name. I have two regions, okay. I have my infrastructure in two regions. One is Mumbai region and Sydney region. Suppose if if there is some issue with one region, okay, consider the Mumbai region is, there are some issues with the Mumbai region, or if there is a failure, if some failure happens for the Mumbai region, what happens? We can access our application from Sydney region. So what this Route 53 is doing? Usually, if I'm sending a request, so if I'm sending the request, DNS by using the domain name, so the domain name will be converted to the IP address, so that I will be accessing the application. So the second advantage we have with the Route 53 is we can, okay, it also helps, Route 53 will also helps us from the regional failures. How it is helping us? If our infrastructure is maintained at two different regions, and because of some reasons, if one region is down, if the infrastructure in one region is down, if the application is, if my application in one region is down, so my application is down because of the infrastructure. Okay, if there is some issues with the Mumbai region, and if my application is down, then definitely people can able to access my application from the Sydney region. So how we are doing this setup? Like we are integrating Route 53 to both the load balancer. You see here, I have my EC2 machines in the Mumbai region. I have two EC2 machines. This is one EC2 machine, and this is another EC2 machine. And I've configured load balancer to both the EC2 machines. So usually when the request comes to the load balancer will divert the traffic. Okay. When the request comes to the load balancer will divert the traffic to the EC2 machine. This concept we have understood already. What is load balancer? How the load balancer is going to divert the request, all these things. So usually if I'm accessing my application, the request will first go to the load balancer. From the load balancer, the request will be diverted to the EC2 machines. Okay. And here I'm maintaining my infrastructure in two different regions. Because of some reasons, if one region is failed, so that I can able to access my application from the other region. So in this way, Route 53 will also helps us from the regional failures. This is another advantage we are having. Okay. And you see here, suppose if there is no Route 53, assume that there is no DNS name. Assume that we don't have a service called Route 53. Okay. And here we are having the setup. We have infrastructure configured in the Mumbai region as well as Sydney region. And Mumbai region is having a load balancer. It's a load balancer. Sydney region is also having its load balancer. Usually, whatever the request coming to the load balancer of Mumbai region, it will divert the traffic to the EC2 instances of Mumbai region. And if the load comes to the Sydney region, then only it will divert the request to the EC2 instances. But since we have Route 53, we are just integrating both the load balancer URLs with this one, Route 53. If one region failure occurs, we will set like one as primary, the other one as secondary. Okay, while integrating the Route 53 to both the regions, we'll be configuring like Mumbai is the primary region and Sydney is the secondary region. If some failover happens to the Mumbai region, then we'll be accessing the services from Sydney region. Any questions here in understanding what is this Route 53 and okay, what is how the Route 53 helps us from the regional failures? You understood, right? Consider our infrastructure is running in two different regions, Mumbai and Sydney region. We have integrated Route 53 to both the regions, and we made the primary region as Mumbai, and we made the secondary region as Sydney. So when will the traffic will be routed to the Sydney region? You understand when the traffic will be routed to the Sydney region if some failover happens to the. Are you getting, Chandrakant?
Yes, yes, I'm getting.
So if
When
something
there is
happens,
a
okay, if
change
some
in
failover happens to the Mumbai region, then only the
the
request will be diverted to.
Sydney region.
So in that case, usually Route 53 is protecting us, is helping us from the regional failures.
Period.
This one advantage we are having, okay, by using Route 53. And let's see here, usually, the domain names will be like, we'll be having some domain names like .com, .info, .org. These are the domain names, okay? So we have top level domain names and second level domain names. So you based on the requirement, usually we'll go and select the domain names and all. But the important thing is Route 53 routing policies. Let's understand the routing policies. We have some routing policies in Route 53. We'll be discussing about routing policies in the Route 53. What are the routing policies? We have listed some of the routing policies here. We have a simple routing policy, weighted, latency, failover, and geolocation routing policies. Let's come to the first one, which is called a simple routing policy. Okay, we have many routing policies here in Route 53. So when we start the practicals, let's understand like what are the routing policies. But before going ahead, let's understand the theory part, like what are the different routing policies we have. We have simple, weighted, latency, failover, geolocation. These are the types of routing policies we have. Let's understand the simple routing policy. Simple routing policy is nothing but attaching the domain name to the IP address. Okay, this is the default routing policy. So if I have infrastructure in the single region, consider if I have my infrastructure in single region, if I want to access this, if I want to integrate my domain name, if I want to integrate my domain name to that IP address, yes, we'll go for simple routing policy. Simple routing policy is nothing but attaching my domain name to the IP address. I told you, very simple thing. My application is running in one server and I'm trying to access my application with the help of IP address, the help of public IP. And I don't want to share my public IP with anyone. I want to have the domain name. I want to integrate the domain name to my public IP and I want to share my domain name to the others. In that case, we will go for what? In that case, I'll go for simple routing policy. This is the default routing policy. Okay. Let's see, let's understand what is the second one. We also have weighted routing policies. We also have weighted routing policy. Understand by the name itself, we can easily understand this one, weighted. So consider I have my infrastructure running in two different regions. My application is running in both US Est1 as well as US East 1 and US West 1. My application is running in two different regions. One is US East 1 and the other one is US West 1. So we can also configure the routing policy in such a way where 20% of the traffic will be routed to US East 1 and 80% of the traffic can be routed to 80% of the traffic can be routed to US West 1. So in this way also we can divert the traffic. Okay, you understood, right? So how we are configuring this DNS routing policies? This is a weighted routing policy. So if any traffic is coming, okay, if any traffic is coming to this domain name, so what is happening here? We are splitting it. This weighted routing policy will split your traffic. This weighted routing policy will split your traffic. 20% of the traffic will be routed to US East 1. 80% of the traffic can be routed to US West 1. This also can happen. This is called weighted routing policy. It is up to you. It is not mandatory that 20 and 80. If you want 50% of your traffic must be routed to US East 1 and the remaining 50% of the traffic must be routed to US West 1, you can configure in that way also. I'm just taking an example here. 20% of the traffic is being diverted to the first region called US East 1, and the remaining 80% of the traffic is routed to US West 1. This is how, when we go for this particular configuration, suppose my most of the customers, okay, my most of the clients are from US West 1. If my most of the clients, most of the users accessing my application are from US West 1, then what I will do, most of the traffic will be routed to US West 1. And I have very less customers, okay, based on this one, okay. So I have only very few customers from US East 1, then I'll be divert. So this is how actually we will divert the traffic from, this is how we actually divert the traffic based on the weighted routing policy also.
Okay.
Any question? Right, latency. Next one is latency routing policy. Latency, what is latency? To try to understand now here, we have two regions, US East 1 and US West 1. And I'm trying to access the application. I'm just trying to access an application, and the time taking, okay, the response, okay, the response that I'm getting is in 100 milliseconds. Assume that after sending the request, to US East 1, I'm getting the response within 100 milliseconds. At the same time, if I'm sending a request to the US West 1 region, I'll be getting the response within 300 milliseconds. So which one is taking much time? Which region is taking much time to process my request? So here in this scenario, if I'm sending a request, okay, if the request goes to US East 1, I'm getting a response within 100 milliseconds. And if my request goes to US West 1, I'll be getting a response within 300 milliseconds. So which is having more latency here? We need to understand which one is having more latency and which one is having less latency. In this scenario, US West 1 is having more latency because it is taking some 300 milliseconds. US West 1 is having more latency, and here the lowest latency network is US East 1. So based on the latency routing policy, if you configure the latency routing policy, our traffic will be routed to the lowest network latency. That's what I'm saying here. These kind of routing policies will be helpful if the customers are from different regions. If the customer is accessing the application from this region, if the customer is accessing the application from US East 1, if the customer is accessing the application from US East 1, he is very nearer to the US East 1. That's why he will be getting a response within 100 milliseconds. The customer is far away from the US West 1. That's why he is getting a response within 300 milliseconds. So this routing policy is mainly to serve the requests to the customers who are very nearer to the locations. The customers are very nearer to US East 1. They'll be getting responses from this US East 1. The customers are nearer to US West 1. They'll be getting responses from US West 1. This is called latency network policy. If this particular for this particular customer, again, I'm trying to explain again. You see here, if this particular customer is staying in US East 1, okay, consider this particular customer is staying in US East 1 region. For him, which is the nearest region? US East 1 or West 1? The nearest region is East 1. So he can get response within 100 milliseconds. For him, the forest region, US West 1 is the forest, far away. He's far away from US West 1. It will take some 300 milliseconds to get the response. That's the reason latency-based routing policy allows you to route the traffic based on the lowest network latency. Okay? It will allow the traffic based on the lowest network latency. Right. And the next one is failover routing policy. This failover routing policy is used when you want to create an active or passive setup. So I want to configure. Okay, I don't know when I don't want to see the downtime for my application. I don't want to see any downtime for my application. That's the reason why I'm configuring my infrastructure in two different regions. I have my application running in US East 1 and US West 1, but I will make US East 1 as active. Sorry. I will make I will make US East 1 as active, and I will make US West 1 as passive. What do you mean by active and passive? What do you mean by active and passive here? So
Active
if
means which continuously changes, and passive means which won't change on regular time.
suppose if I make US East 1 as active, usually only US East 1, only US East 1 will get, the traffic will be routed to only US East 1 only. So the request, US East 1 will accept the request and it will be sending the responses. Passive in the sense US West 1 will be there, but it is not active. It is there. Okay, the infrastructure is there, application, the entire replica is there. Whatever the replica, whatever the setup we have in US East 1, the same setup is there in the US West 1, but it is passive. So when US West 1 will become active, if something happens to US East 1. I don't understand. We are having two different regions, US East 1 and US West 1. If something happens to US East 1, then the US West 1 will become active. So I told you, one example. Route 53 will protect us from the regional failures, will help us from the regional failures. Okay, we'll be configuring in two different regions. If one region failure occurs, then we'll be configuring we'll be accessing that application from the another region. Okay, this is failover, and we also have geolocation routing policy. Meaning, you see, I have an application. Okay, consider I have an application called Netflix. If I open Netflix, if I try to access Netflix from India, I'll be getting the movies, okay, all these things, okay, all these things related to the India only. So if I am in China and if I try to access the Netflix application, definitely I'll be getting the content of the Chinese. Okay, if I am the customer of India, I'll be accessing the content related to India. If I am the customer of, if I will be staying, okay, if I am in a different geographical region, not the customer also. Think about the geographical region. I am in India today. Okay, if I install Amazon application in my mobile, I'll be seeing the content related to India, and I will see the prices, everything in, I will see the prices, everything in rupees, Indian currency. If I change the location, okay, if I go to another location, there, if I want to use Amazon application, so we'll be getting the content based on their geographical location. So in the geographical location, if the prices, okay, if the prices are they're displaying everything in the dollars, usually I'll get the content in the dollars, and I'll see the items that are that will be delivered in that particular location. So this is how the geolocation routing policy will also works. We have geolocation routing policy also. So these are the things that I wanted to discuss. Let's see the practicals. Okay, if we want to see the practicals, I don't have my AWS account is suspended. My free trial is over. Okay, free trial is over from my account. Sure, I'll try to create a new one tomorrow. We'll see the practicals tomorrow. Okay, this is okay. Let's see the practicals tomorrow. Okay, let's see the practicals of DNS tomorrow. So first, what we will be doing is we'll be registering the domain name. Okay, otherwise, if you have, let me, who is there in the site? Okay, I'll try to create a new account. Okay, then I'll be showing you the practicals. You want geolocation, okay? So what is this geolocation? Let me explain you what is this geolocation. Very simple, nothing is there. Consider, okay? So either you can take this example, assume that we have another example, okay? To understand the geolocation routing policy. The traffic will be sent based on the geographical location of your users. Suppose if the user is trying to access the application from India, okay? If the user is trying to access the application from India, so the server has to send the content related to the India only. The server cannot see what happened. The request will be reaching to the server, which delivers the content of India. Consider here we have two regions, right? In this example, In this example itself, we have two different regions. One is US East 1. The other one is what? One is US East 1. You can see a region here, US East 1 and US West 1. And here two different customers are there. Europe customer and US customer. If Europe customer is trying to access the application, the traffic will be routed to the server of Europe West 1. If US customer is accessing the application, the traffic will be routed to the US East 1. So how we are configuring is, okay, our application is running here in two different servers. One is US East 1 server and Europe West 1 server. But the content is different here. The application is same. The content is different. The data is different. So the data that should be displayed for US customer should be different. The data that should be displayed for US customer should be different. The data that should be displayed for Europe customer should also be different. So if Europe customer is trying to access the application, he should get the content. He should get the content related to his country, based on his country. Okay. So if US customer is accessing, then he should get the content from this particular server, US East 1. Why? Because for US customer, the currency, okay, the currency, everything will be shown in the form of dollars. For Europe customer, the currency must be shown in the form of euros. Let's assume this is an example. This is just an example to understand. Consider we also have an Indian customer. And there should be one more server. There should be one more server like Mumbai or Hyderabad. So that for India customer, the traffic will be routed to the India server. You'll be getting responses from the India server because the content must be shown in the form of like Indian currency. Okay. For him, for the Indian customer, the data must be shown in the form of Indian currency, everything related to India-based content. Any questions now? You understood, right? What is geolocation routing policy? Based on the geographical locations also, we can also configure Route 53 by using geographical location, geolocation routing policy. If we implement this is the actual requirement. If this is the actual requirement, we can configure this one. Hope you understood, Shailu, no? Any questions here in understanding? Let's see the practicals of this tomorrow. Okay. Since I have not created any new AWS account, I'll be showing you the next. Okay, we'll see the practicals of all the things, how we are going to configure all these things. Okay. First, what we'll be doing is we'll be going to purchase the domain name. You know how to purchase the domain name? If not from the AWS, if you want to purchase the domain name from internet, you see we have a website called GoDaddy. How to purchase the domain name? Go to GoDaddy or some other kind of there are many websites, not only GoDaddy. Okay. You see, you can search like we have GoDaddy and like you see I'll show you domain purchase. You can search with domain purchase website, Hostinger. We have Hostinger, Namecheap, GoDaddy. Okay, there are many things. Not only GoDaddy, we have many websites. They'll provide the domain names. Okay, they'll provide the domain names. We can purchase the domain names from these websites. Let's go to the popular website called GoDaddy. I'm just going for GoDaddy. So here you can search for the domain name. Okay, if I want to purchase a domain name, usually I'll go for a website like GoDaddy and I will be searching for the domain name I require. In the AWS also same thing we do. So what I'm doing is I'm going to purchase a domain like vamsicloud.com. This just for an example, okay? I'm just going to create a website called vamsicloud.com. That's the reason why I'm just searching for this domain name, if the domain name is available or not. You can see here, this domain name, is it showing the domain name is available? Yes. This domain is already taken. Okay. But still we can get this domain by paying 9959. This is for a year. You can see here. This is just a, I think this is just for a, this is just a broker fee. Okay. This is just a broker service. So if you pay this amount, okay, they will try whether you will get this domain name or not. Okay. So maybe you can go for alternatives. If I'm searching for vamsicloud.com, vamsicloud.com is already taken. You can see clearly here this domain is already taken. And if this is already taken, you need to go for some alternatives. This is alternative. Vamsicloud.in is available. How much we need to pay? How much we need to pay? Only 1 rupee. Okay, if I want to get this domain name, I need to pay only 1 rupee. Okay. So this 1 rupee is only for first year. This is only for first year. First year only with 3 year term period. Okay. If I want to purchase this domain name, it is clearly showing here. I need to pay 1 rupee. And we have other alternatives also. You can see here Vamsi.cloud. If you want to go for Vamsi.cloud, I need to pay 167 rupees for the first year. Vamsicloud.one, I need to pay 335 rupees for first year. Vamsicloud.shop, I need to pay 125.21 for the first year only. Okay, all these are, it is clearly shown. Vamsicloud.co.in, this is 1 rupee. So you can see here, it is clearly showing that how much we need to pay and for this domain name. If I want to purchase any domain name, I am just going for this one, Vamsicloud.one. I'm just adding, I will be adding this cloud. Otherwise, I'll be going this one, Vamsi.cloud. I'm selecting this one. Okay, make it yours. I'll be adding to the cart. Okay, adding to the cart. This is added to the cart, you can see. I'm adding this to the cart. I'll be selecting this one, vamsicloud.in. Continue. So I'm just adding to this cart. I don't want any domain protection. I'm just adding no domain protection. I'm going with no domain protection. So we need to log in with some Google account or email account. Then only we can purchase this one. It will ask you to pay. It will ask you to provide the details and all. You need to purchase this by paying the amount that it is showing. Okay. So it will show some amount for 1 year. We need to pay it off for the 1 year and we need to purchase it. Then we can link this domain name to our IP address. So how we are going to link this domain name, how we are going to purchase the domain name in the AWS, and how we are going to create, how we are going to implement the routing policies under Route 53. We have discussed about the different routing policies, right? Simple routing policy, weighted, geolocation, latency based. We discussed about many routing policies. We'll be seeing all the routing policies in detail in the coming session. Any questions we can discuss. We are not going to purchase anything from here outside. In the AWS itself, we can register the domain and we can attach our domain to the website. Any questions you have?